This morning, Emma felt she was at loggerheads with everyone, not least George Romney, who was sketching her for yet another portrait, this time in the pose of wild-eyed Medea, classical slayer of children. The clothes she wore were tattered and revealing, her hair teased out wildly with twigs, face streaked with dark lines of heavy makeup. It was her eyes he needed most, that look of near madness he had struggled hard to create, which Emma kept discarding. Old Romney, with his lined, walnut-coloured face and unruly grey hair, looked up from the pad on his lap and glared. They had already had words about her inability to sit still, Romney pretending he had no idea of what triggered her fidgety behaviour. Yet he had seen Greville's face that morning, when he had delivered her to the studio. The black looks and stiff bearing that had characterized their exchanges, he all formality, Emma all meekness, until Greville departed. Emma had spent the last half hour locked in an internal argument, in which she naturally cast herself as the aggrieved party. Playing both roles, her face was animated by point and counterpoint. She was winning, of course, and imagined Charles Greville being easier to deal with than the real person, especially as she was of the opinion that the previous night's behaviour had been due to nothing more than high spirits. How dare Greville insist that if she couldn't learn to contain herself, he would never take her out again? As ever, when he was working, Romney's grey hair stood on his head, giving him the appearance of an elderly monkey, the impression heightened by his large, dark brown eyes. The old man was kindness itself, and Greville's black mood of this morning was no fault of his, so Emma worked to put the mad stare back in place. Romney nodded and went back to his frenzied sketching. She should be angry with her lover about this, too, being sold like a carcass. Greville had an arrangement with the artist. He provided the model, Romney provided the oils and the talent. The money from the sale of the resulting portrait was split between them, Greville's portion to set off the cost of keeping her. Romney had painted her a dozen times now. Every picture had found an eager buyer. Romney's eyes darted back and forth, boring into her. Did he, with his artist's insight, see how she felt? She loved Charles, with a passion that had grown deeper through 3 years of attachment, and enjoyed their domestic harmony. Yet certain losses rankled, like the social life she had enjoyed on first arriving at Edgware Road, which had been slowly choked off. Her life now seemed sober and confined. After a year, Greville had moved into Edgware Road permanently, imposing his fussy bachelor habits on what had been an easy-going household. He had let the townhouse he had built in Portman Square to ease his debts. However, it had obviously not eased them enough. Only the week before he had scolded her for giving a halfpenny to a beggar. Excursions from the house had been rare of late. She could never be brought to the notion that her own natural vivacity was in part responsible for this. Was it her fault that when they went to a ball or a rout, nearly every man in the room sought to engage her attention? Was she to blame if powerful and well-connected men cared not a whit if their outrageous gallantries offended her lover? It was not her fault that Greville was so jealous and insecure, unable to accept her repeated assurances that he had no cause for concern. He had insisted that she had made an exhibition of herself the previous night. To Emma, singing and dancing were the stuff of life, and a glass or two of champagne encouraged her. She knew that Greville had cause to celebrate. As a collector, he acquired only to sell, and was careful in the way he built up collections to make sure that the whole was always vastly superior to the sum of its parts. Many a time, quick disposal had saved him from ruin. He had been corresponding with his uncle in Naples, using his good offices to amass a set of Roman and Etruscan artifacts that he had already sold at a substantial profit. The news that his virtue, in the company of his uncle, had arrived in England had sent him into raptures of delight, and loosened his normally tight purse strings to such a degree that he had insisted on taking Emma to the Ranelagh pleasure gardens.